This is Total Immersion, an academic thriller, Book 6 in the Dr. Rowena Halley series, by Sid Stark. Copyright 2021, published by Helia Press. Narrated by Sid Stark. Production copyright 2021. Chapter 1. It wasn't the broken plate that smashed everything. No, those fault lines had been running through us and between us from the very beginning, tearing us apart, even when it felt like they were pulling us together. Their tremors had been with us from the start, threatening our foundations. The signs had been plain to see, if we had cared to look. But we had been willfully blind to the signals, taking the seismic foreshocks as evidence of rising passion, not an oncoming tidal wave. "Aaron's missing," Alex said. He was frowning as he said it, a sharp crease between his eyebrows. Normally Alex Miller, my almost fiancé, looked a good 10 years younger than his actual age of 39. His face was thin and, when he was happy, boyishly expressive, with hazel eyes full of that light of intelligence that's more attractive than mere good looks. But right now, worry was adding lines to his face, and that light of intelligence was turned away from me, along with his eyes. Not because he was afraid of how I might react to yet another conversation about his ex-girlfriend, who was back in his life in a bigger and bigger way. Because he was much more concerned about Aaron than he was about me. At least, that's how it felt. "How long's she been gone?" I asked. I was proud of how calm my voice was. I thought I sounded sympathetic and supportive, not at all like a woman on the verge of screaming and throwing crockery at the person I had convinced myself I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. "She didn't show up at work this morning," Alex said, "and she hasn't answered her phone all day." "Doesn't she go AWOL pretty regularly?" I was pretty sure I managed to keep my voice warm, sympathetic, and non-judgmental. But it was hard. Alex had started a hot and very heavy affair with Aaron Carver when they had been serving together in the Navy. It had been, I had gathered, one of those lightning strike, once-in-a-lifetime loves. Or, at least, it had been for him. I had originally thought it had been for her, too. But the more I watched her, the less I thought she had ever actually loved him. After spending a summer seeing her interact with him on a regular basis, I was starting to suspect that she had always just been using him as a shield to hide from her own problems. My suspicions were strengthened by the fact that their great love had collapsed under the weight of Aaron's extreme, deep-seated fucked-upness. This had caused her to drink, sleep around, and disappear for weeks at a time. During my more judgmental moods, I thought that this was not how you treated someone you really loved. They shouldn't be just another drug that you use to dull the pain. Or perhaps for someone like Aaron, the drugs you used to dull the pain were what you loved most in life. You still used them, though, and then threw them away when you were done with them. Aaron wasn't quite ready to throw Alex away yet, though. Or maybe there was still some tie between them they couldn't break, possibly a karmic one. After cutting off all contact with each other for years, they had both ended up at the DLI, the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and were now working together closely. I liked to tell myself it didn't bother me. More and more, I was realizing I was lying. Under other circumstances, it could have been okay. Alex and Aaron had broken up a long time before he and I had gotten together, when we had both been adjuncting in New Jersey. Our relationship had continued when I'd moved first to North Carolina, then back to my alma mater, Indiana University, and then to Georgia, in pursuit of contingent faculty jobs, and he'd taken a job teaching Arabic at the DLI. Now I was spending the summer with him in Monterey, teaching an intensive Russian course at the nearby Civilian Institute. Everything should have been hunky-dory. Or so I was trying to tell myself. Alex was very demonstrably with me now, and Aaron was with someone else too, another ex-service member named Frank McAvoy, who'd taken a shine to her when all three of them had been in Iraq, and had taken his chance when they'd both ended up in Northern California. We'd all tried to act like two normal couples who had a lot in common and enjoyed spending time together. Frank was now with the FBI and had offered to try and help me get a job there myself. Then I could leave my precarious job in Georgia, maybe move out to Northern California with Alex, And all four of us could live in peace and harmony and happily ever after. The problem was, Alex and I both disliked Frank. I kind of suspected Erin did, too. She was just even better at lying to herself than I was. Or maybe she just didn't know how to be with someone she really loved. Maybe she'd never really loved someone at all. Maybe she wasn't capable of it. Or maybe she had an even more tragic backstory than I knew. To my critical eyes, that didn't make her any less of a user. In any case, Alex and Erin's hot and heavy affair was still casting long shadows over both of them. And then, this past May, Frank had shot Erin. The story was that it was a stupid accident. They'd been doing some target practice together. Somehow, he'd accidentally fired a loaded handgun into her left side at point-blank range. Fortunately, it had missed everything vital. Her heart and lungs were fine. So, she told me in one of the weirdly intimate conversations we'd been having recently, was her left breast. There had been some concern there would be permanent scarring and distortion. But everything was healing up nicely. She'd lifted up her shirt and shown me before I could stop her. "This is different," Alex said, interrupting unwelcome memories of the pink healing scar on the smooth, pale skin covering Erin's left breast. I didn't particularly care to look at other women's breasts. I especially didn't care to look at Erin's, since she and I were disturbingly alike. Clearly, Alex had a type, because we were both slender and athletic, with the dark hair, blue eyes, and pale skin of a Celtic maiden in a BBC drama. Alex, it had to be said, was not alone in having that type, because we both got plenty of attention from most men and some women. I was 6 inches taller than Erin's 5'4", able to look Alex and most other men in the eye, but other than that, we could have been sisters. So, all in all, I had not been pleased when Erin had shown me her breasts. I would have said that was from my jealousy and my deeply rooted heterosexuality. I had a suspicion some of my friends would tell me it was from deeply repressed lesbian tendencies. I was 99% sure that was the kind of liberal academic bullshit that won us so few friends and allies out in the real world. 1% of me thought it might be true. Realistically, I was probably a 1, maybe a 2 on the Kinsey scale. But that was normal, right? And it didn't matter anyway because I had Alex. I would never have to dive into the anguish and heartbreak that was same-sex dating. If things worked out the way I hoped they would, I would never have to dive into the anguish and heartbreak that was any kind of dating ever again. Right? Right? "How is it different?" I asked. From Alex's sudden look my way, I guessed that my voice had lost a lot of its former warmth and sympathy, and the underlying fear and anger was starting to show through. "Erin wouldn't miss work," Alex said. "She'd cheat on me and leave me hanging, but she wouldn't fuck around where work was concerned. That was the only thing she could ever be counted on to show up for." "Uh-huh," I said. I resisted the temptation to point out that Erin couldn't cheat on Alex now, since they weren't together. I knew what he was trying to say, and I also knew that in his mind, maybe they always would be a little bit together. I told myself that was okay. After all, I had someone I'd always be a little bit together with, too. I should be more understanding. "Should we drive up to Salinas and check on her?" I asked. Alex's face relaxed into a relieved smile. "Yeah," he said. "That's a great idea." He looked at his phone, checking the time and probably for any text notifications. "Maybe we should go ahead and go," he said. "If you don't mind, we can grab something on the way if you're hungry." I was starving. I was also trying to put myself on a diet. "That's okay," I said. "Let's check on Erin first, and then figure out what we want to do. Maybe she just has the flu and her phone died or something. We can bring her some soup and hit up a restaurant in Salinas before heading back." "Great idea. And Rowena?" An expression that was equal parts grateful appreciation and shameful guilt crossed Alex's face. "Thanks. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend your summer, and especially not your last weekend here in California." "No problem," I said. "Let's get going." Chapter 2. Alex was paying $1,500 a month for a crappy one-bedroom apartment amongst the strip malls, dollar stores, and fast food joints on Casanova Avenue in Monterey. The only redeeming feature about it was that he had a 10-minute drive to work. Aaron had inherited a detached house in Salinas, half an hour away. To my eyes, it was also a fairly crappy house, although admittedly nicer than anywhere I had ever lived. But property values on the California coast were so ridiculously high that even a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom ranch-style house that looked like it could be blown away in a stiff breeze was worth a cool $500,000. It was one of the many strokes of good fortune Erin appeared to have gotten in her life. Too bad none of that stopped her from being a fucked-up mess. I guess money really can't buy you love. Of course, my own experience was that virtuous poverty was no guarantee either. "I'm really fucking sorry," Alex said for the 3rd time as we drove north up Route 1, the highway that ran up most of California's scenic but dangerous coast, in his piece of shit, his words, Nissan Sentra. I had offered to drive my own equally shitty Honda Civic, but Alex had said the hideous grinding noise that had emanated from the gearbox the last time I had tried to shift into second in his presence had put him off it, and he wasn't going to get into it again until I had it worked on. Then we had argued for a while about the advisability of me setting off on a cross-country drive in it on Sunday. The argument had ended in a truce when we'd both realized that neither of us had the money to get it fixed. I was just going to pray as hard as I could to whatever kindly disposed supernatural powers happened to be looking my way that I made it back to Georgia. "There's no need," I reassured him. Again. I was getting pretty tired of this reassurance shit. I was starting to be haunted by the suspicion that I was being forced to make him feel better about his guilt for doing wrong by me. And I was starting to resent that, and that was making me feel guilty. I had imbibed enough of the expectations of saintly womanhood while living in Russia to feel bad about not being able to comfort my man when he was being racked by pangs of conscience for mistreating me. I should be all forgiving, right? Or at least, I shouldn't be so upset about this, right? All couples went through hard times, right? Getting through them and reaffirming your commitment to each other was part of what made you stronger. Right? I realized I had said right to myself at least 6 times in the past half hour. I needed a distraction. "Do you mind if I put on some music?" I asked. "Go right ahead." Alex sounded relieved to have an excuse to be generous. "Whatever you like." I brought out my phone and opened the music app. In a moment that even in my current funk I recognized as marvelously, gloriously ironic, Florence and the Machine's "You've Got the Love" came on. "What do you think is going on with Aaron?" I said, loudly, in order to drown out the lyrics about transcendent love. Alex shrugged, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "She's been going through a rough patch right now." "That's understandable," I said, although in my heart of hearts, I thought that after 3 months, it was high time for Erin to pull herself out of her rough patch. "It's not just the, getting shot. It's, well, some stuff might be getting out. Bad stuff. About her. About what she did. About what we did. In Iraq." "Uh-huh," I said. I tried to think of a way to ask, delicately and sensitively, if this was about the torture program at the black site Aaron, Alex, and Frank had all apparently been involved in. I didn't know the details. I didn't want to know the details. I'd spent a lot of time in my previous career in a human rights NGO working with torture victims. I could fill in the details pretty well myself. I would just substitute waterboarding, the U.S.'s current preferred method of torture, for electrocution, the method favored by Russian forces. Alex had confessed his involvement with this particularly unsavory aspect of the current war on terror to me last semester. He'd said that he'd mainly been responsible for processing the paperwork, which I believed. He said he was tormented by guilt about it, which I also believed. Only a guilty conscience could make someone act as badly as he had towards me. He was now trying to seek redemption. Unfortunately, his attempts at seeking redemption had thus far not made either of us any happier. He blew out a big breath. "It's just so fucked up, Rowena. as you know. And I fucking hate how it's pulling me back into all that shit. I fucking hate that I'm spending your last weekend here in California chasing after Aaron and dealing with our dirty past. It's okay, I said. It needs to be done. In another moment of delicious irony, I'm not calling you a liar came on. Jesus Christ. I was seriously starting to rethink my fondness for this album and for Florence and the Machine in general. But shutting it off now seemed too obvious. I would have to sit through it and hope that Shuffle would choose something less apropos for the next song. Someone's been digging stuff up, Alex was saying. Some fucking journalist. Why the fuck can't they let things lie? Why the fuck do they have to go poking their noses into absolutely fucking everything? Well, I said, you know, accountability, transparency, freedom of speech, all that. Yeah, sounds great until it's fucking aimed at you. Alex slouched down in his seat, not looking at me. I couldn't tell if he was in a general snit or a specific snit aimed at me. I had never been a journalist, but I had been engaged to one. Just like Alex had had a lightning strike love with another person, so had I. Mine was with the Russian investigative journalist Dima Kuznetsov. Very good-looking, very driven, especially when it came to exposing crime, corruption, and evil-doing. Maybe because there was a fair amount of crime, corruption, and evil-doing in his own backstory. So much, in fact, that he'd sent me away in order to keep me safe from all the darkness and danger that followed him around. I had not been happy about that decision, but I hadn't been able to do anything about it. Not only was Dima very, very, very fucked up, he always got his own way. Maybe that was why Alex's problems had snuck under my radar at first. My dosimeter for troubled souls was set to such a high level that Alex had seemed normal and healthy. Sadly, that was turning out not to be true. Anyway, I couldn't tell right now if Alex's anger at journalists was just because they were causing trouble for Aaron, or from repressed jealousy of Dima. He'd told me several times that he didn't begrudge me my past or resent Dima for the part he'd played in it. The first time we'd had that conversation, it had probably been healthy and smart. The next time had maybe been a little less healthy and smart. The last time we'd had it, which had been just yesterday after Dima had texted me in the middle of dinner and I'd stopped talking to Alex to answer him, should perhaps have been a major red flag. So apparently this journalist is planning to write, like, a whole fucking book on the U.S. program of, well, Alex said. Enhanced interrogation, I suggested, when he trailed off, unable to get the words out. Yeah, that shit. And somehow she found out about Aaron, and now she's all hot to talk to her, to get a woman's perspective on the issue, let her tell her side of the story. It sounds all fucking noble and great, but it'll tear Aaron apart. The whole thing was so... It was so... He swallowed and scrubbed at his face, his hand rasping on the stubble that he hadn't bothered to shave for the past couple of days. The slanting light of the setting sun made his light brown hair turn golden. It also lit up the gray patch on his cheek that had driven him to start shaving again last year, after half a decade of flirting with civilian scruffiness. But these past few weeks he'd stopped caring about that kind of thing. Shaving had been spotty at best. Meals had gone forgotten unless I reminded him. Laundry had only happened because I'd done it. That made me mad, but it also made me want to lay my hand on his cheek and let the comfort flow from my skin to his. He was suffering, and I hated to see him suffer. I wanted to ride in on a white horse, my armor shining in the sun, and sweep him off his feet and carry him off into the sunset, to where he'd live happily ever after and never hurt again. I was aware that many people would tell me that was wrong. My involvement with fucked up men had driven me to occasional dives into self-help literature, which had told me that wanting to save people when they were in pain was not altruism and nobility of soul, but a pathological sign of a troubled childhood. According to the gurus, instead of helping each other out, we're supposed to pay professionals $50 an hour to polish us up so we can present nothing but our perfect selves to the world. Or in other words, we're supposed to pay strangers to tell us true love is a pathology and we need to learn to be more selfish. To me, it sounded like part of the American ideal of boring, sanitized, micromanaged, meaningless lives. Plus, my own savior fantasies combined both masculine and feminine gender roles in a way that probably meant I was supposed to declare myself to be non-binary, or something. Too bad I was unequivocally 100% female, if currently wondering exactly where I fell on the Kinsey scale. But it was also true that my intense need to help others had gotten me into fairly biggish trouble on more than one occasion. And right now it looked to be well on the way to breaking my heart. Again. Erin was just in such a shitty position, Alex said. You know how it is. If a woman refuses to torture and kill, then she's a girly girl wimp who can't be counted on. If she agrees to torture and kill, then she's a monster, 100 times worse than a man who does the same thing. It's the old lose-lose. And it wasn't like the people she was questioning were such angels. You hear all these stories about how the prisoners in Abu Ghraib and Gitmo and so on were mainly innocent, and that's true. And you hear all these stories about how they were decent, good-hearted people. And maybe they were, to other men. But to women, they were monsters. Maybe they weren't all terrorists, but to women, they were just about as bad. The female MPs who were guarding them, they'd come off shift shaking with fear and rage from all the rape threats and shit they were getting, all day, every day. And then they'd have to hide it from the men in their units, because admitting it would make them look weak. The only person they could tell was Erin. So she had good reason to want to hurt those men we were holding. I'm not saying what happened there was good, but I could understand why she did what she did. But if it all came out, you know what would happen. The men who gave the orders, and the men who carried them out, will get forgiven, and Erin will get crucified because she was the only woman, and so she'll have to shoulder all the moral burden and be the target for all the moral outrage, even though she was the most junior person involved. And she really wants to turn her life around, make up for what she's done, and she needs a friend to help her out while she tries to do that. Someone who at least has an inkling of what she's going through. I can't walk away from her right now, Rowena. Surely you understand that. I understand that, I said. And I did. It just didn't stop me from being gnawed by jealousy. My phone started playing Kiss with a Fist. Oh God, I never cared for this song about dysfunctional abusive relationships. Now it seemed like the shuffle algorithm was just playing with me. The ping of an incoming text provided a welcome interruption. I checked my notifications. It was a message from Dima. Chapter 3. Darling Inechka, it said, are you busy right now? I glanced over at Alex. Then I wished I hadn't. I was certain that my look had been furtive and guilty. But Alex was staring at the road ahead, deliberately it felt, not catching my eye. Why? I asked. No reason. Just wanted to chat. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. Are you back from the front? Dima had spent the past 2.5 years reporting from the front lines of the war in the Donbass. His idea of proper war correspondence involved being actually under fire as much as possible. Last week he had reported from a series of firefights around the embattled city of Avdiivka, or Avdiivka, as us Russian speakers would say. Then he had gone silent for several days. I had told myself it wasn't because he'd been killed. I had also told myself it wasn't because he was with Polya, the girl, she was apparently at least 10 years his junior, a friend had set him up with, and who he kept talking about marrying. I had also told myself that him getting married should make me happy. That had maybe been the biggest lie I'd told myself so far. Sort of. In Donetsk now. Thinking about going home. Home to Moscow? I asked. Yes. Mama's not doing so good. They're talking about a transplant. Already? Galina Ivanovna, Dima's mother and my almost mother-in-law, had been suffering from increasingly severe kidney disease the past few years. Most of the doctors she'd seen said there was little that could be done. A doctor herself, she had resigned herself to the situation a while ago. Dima was less resigned. Dima, I gathered from reading between the lines, was in a state of furious, burning despair, especially since he thought that one of the reasons treatment options were so limited was because of him. the mother of Dima Kuznetsov, the oppositionist who occupied a special position at or near the top of the Kremlin's list of journalists we'd like to kill, was getting turned away by every clinic in Moscow. A colleague she trusted had told her that her only hope was either a transplant or enrollment in a clinical trial for some of the experimental treatments being developed. Transplants were hard to get and came with a lot of risks and problems. Clinical trials weren't risk-free either, and all the ones she'd identified as being useful were in the West. So she'd been waiting and hoping for a stroke of luck. Unfortunately, it seemed her time was running out. Yes, already. Ina, I need your help. Of course. I wrote the reply so fast it felt like I'd sent it through telepathy, not typing. There's a clinical trial in Atlanta. Atlanta is in Georgia, right? Near you. Yes. The Northern California evening air coming in through the cracked open car window should have been cool enough to make me shiver, but instead I was sweating. I've been trying to read about this trial, but you know my English isn't so good. Dima had been studying English on and off since before I'd known him. But even when we'd been engaged, and I, at least, had been seriously planning for him to come live in America, his heart hadn't been in it. He spoke a smattering of phrases he'd picked up from English-speaking war correspondents, but his ability to decipher the language of a clinical trial website was limited. Can you read the website for me? He wrote, and tell me if you think it's a good fit for Mama, and what she has to do to get into it. Of course, I wrote again. I'll do it tomorrow. Thanks, Inotchka. You're a real angel. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. I wanted to point out that my angelic nature hadn't done me much good when he unilaterally decided to end our engagement and send me home, but I didn't. I wanted to ask if Polya was equally angelic. I didn't do that either. Say hi to Galina Ivanovna for me, I wrote, and start looking into getting visas for both of you. Both of us? You're not going to send her to America by herself, are you? I can't go to America. Why not? I asked. I've got stuff to do. I thought about asking what stuff he had to do that could possibly be more important than his mother's life. I decided that wouldn't be very angelic, and more importantly, would make him angry and defensive. And angry and defensive Dima was a real pain in the ass and a major stumbling block towards anything other than confrontation and violence. Okay, I wrote, send me the website and I'll take a look. And I'll also look into getting Galina Ivanovna a visa. Maybe they can expedite it for medical cases. The wait time for Russian citizens to get a U.S. visa, if they could, was a solid 6 to 8 months. Galina Ivanovna might not have that long. I had been suggesting to both of them that they get started on the process ever since the idea had first come up back in March. Now it was the first week of August, and as far as I knew, they hadn't done anything to move things forward. I understood why they'd been dragging their feet. If I'd been in Galina Ivanovna's place, I couldn't say that I'd have done any different. But since I was in my place, it was a source of major frustration and stress for me. Thank you, Inotchka, and good night. Hugs. Chapter 4. What's the matter? I jumped. Alex was no longer staring straight ahead. We'd turned into the neighborhood where Aaron lived, and he was looking at me out of the corner of his eye as we rolled slowly down the residential streets. Nothing. I shut off the music app, which had jumped to the next album and was now playing Lover to Lover, and stuffed my phone back in my purse. That hugs was already burned into my retinas anyway. What, in God's good name, did Dima mean by that? Other than the obvious. And it was a common sign-off amongst Russians. All my female friends ended their emails and messages to me with it, and often threw in a few kisses as well. But Dima never had, unless he'd really meant it. Is everything okay? Is it John? Alex sounded genuinely concerned for me, in a way he hadn't for far too long. What? Oh, no, John's fine, as far as I know. John was my older brother. John was also a majorly fucked up mess, as Alex had witnessed firsthand on more than one occasion. He could hold it together for work, but his personal life made Alex or Dima's seem tame and respectable by comparison. At least they weren't sleeping with a different married woman every weekend. That I knew of. I hated that thought had just floated through my head, but I couldn't stop it from happening, any more than I could stop the thought that now I was edging ever closer to being the cheater. No, no, no. It was Dima, I said, as casually as I could, asking for help for his mother. He wants to see if she can get into a clinical trial in Atlanta, but he doesn't want to have to come to the U.S. with her. Oh. There was a line between Alex's brows again. I couldn't even begin to guess everything he was thinking and feeling right now, other than it looked to be a sick mixture of worry, jealousy, and relief. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't look like anyone's at Erin's house. We were pulling up to it. There were no lights on inside, and no sign of her car in the driveway. Alex parked at the curb and called her. Nothing. Let's go knock on the door, he said after a moment of indecision. Just in case. Yeah, I said, before he could finish that thought. Good idea. The motion sensor lights Erin had gotten installed when she'd moved in. Yet another thing I knew about her that I didn't want to, as we careened ever closer to some kind of unwanted intimacy and even friendship, came on when we stepped onto the cracked strip of concrete that served as her front walk. But that was the only sign of life in the place. Alex knocked at her front door, at first softly, then hard enough to make the whole flimsy structure shake. No response. Why don't you try calling her again, and I'll scout around the outside, I suggested. Maybe we'll get lucky, or maybe I'll hear her phone. Alex nodded tightly. We didn't have to say that me hearing her phone would be a sign of something very bad. But if she was lying passed out, or worse, on her bedroom floor, we didn't want to just leave her there. I started around the house. Erin's aunt had gone for minimal landscaping. There were a couple of spindly bougainvilleas along the right side of the house, and a lawn of extremely patchy grass. Erin had hired someone to come out and mow and prune earlier this summer, and called it a day for outdoor maintenance. It magnified the air of cheap neglect her house radiated. It also made things easier for me. I heard Alex dial as I started down the space between the bougainvillea and the house. I pressed my ear against the glass of the first window as the phone started ringing. No answering ring from within the house greeted me. I stood on my tiptoes and tried to peer inside. The blinds were firmly shut. The rest of the house was the same. All the blinds were drawn, with no sounds, lights, or motion from beyond them to suggest occupancy. Alex tried calling twice more, but we caught no sound of an answering ring inside. Either her phone's switched off or she's gone, I said, when I met him back at the front door. Given that her car's not here, I'd guess the latter. Yeah. Alex made a face. Well, I guess that's good news. Do you... He made another face. Think we should go door to door, ask her neighbors if they've seen her. I looked up and down the street. It was a series of houses a lot like Erin's, only better maintained. A lower middle-class neighborhood, but one that required a 6-figure salary to live in. No one was out walking their dog or working in their garden or playing with their kids. I tried to remember if I'd ever seen anyone do any of those things here. Surely there were normal, nice people around who would have taken an interest in Erin's comings and goings. This neighborhood was of approximately the same socioeconomic class as the one where my grandparents lived in Macon, Georgia, and that one was always teeming with life. But here people mostly seemed to be at work or shut up inside their uninspiring houses. Or maybe the problem wasn't them. Maybe it was Erin, and me. Either way, going door to door didn't seem likely to get good results. What about her family? I suggested. Maybe we should start with them. Have any of them heard from her? Alex made an even unhappier face. Erin doesn't get along with her family. She used to be close with her uncle on the Carver side of the family. You know, the state senator I told you about, the one who wants to get into Congress. and his son, but... Well, she cut off all contact with them after she got back from Iraq. There was some bad shit. Actually, there was some bad shit starting long before that, but it got even worse in Iraq. Anyway, the important thing is that they're not close now. Her mother's sister, the one who gave her this house, was the only person she could stand after she got back, or who could stand her. I don't know if she's even still speaking to her parents, and I don't know how to contact them anyway. I only met them once, and they made it clear I wasn't good enough for them. My dad was only a dean at a biggish university. We weren't actually rich, like the San Diego Carvers, with their multi-million-dollar businesses and their political connections. Okay, I said. What about Frank? I had very little desire to contact Frank. Frank, I'd already decided, was bad news. Frank, I suspected, had been careless intentionally at the shooting range. I didn't have anything to support that suspicion other than my own dislike of him. But my dislike of him was strong enough that I felt like it had to have some kind of basis in reality. I was astonished that Aaron was not only in contact with him, but was still in a relationship with him. Well, no, I wasn't. Aaron seemed to be drawn to bad news like moth to a flame. I would judge her more harshly for it if I weren't beginning to worry that I was the same. But at least my bad news tended to be less of a blowhard. Yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe she just decided to run off for a weekend of fun and good times with Frank. It wouldn't be the first time she's run off or something like that. Although, like I said, she doesn't normally blow off work. Everything else, yes, but not work. Sometimes I think she should have stayed in the service. At least that way she had a little discipline holding her together. As soon as she got out, she just completely fell apart. Yeah, I said. Do you want to call Frank, or shall I? I was not pleased about the fact that I now had Frank's number in my phone. He'd insisted on giving it to me so we could talk about work, if the results of the interview and language testing I'd done 2 months ago for the FBI came back favorable. Then he'd called and texted me a couple of times about non-work things, in a way that looked innocent on the surface, but didn't feel innocent to me. Frank was a player, and just because he'd hooked up with Aaron, and I was very clearly with Alex, didn't mean he didn't want to keep his hand in the game. I was pretty sure I wasn't able to keep my aversion towards him from showing, and that it only added fuel to the fire of his pursuit of me. I can do it. I wanted to wimp out and let Alex make the call, but he looked so miserable as he made the offer that I found myself saying, "Why don't I do it while you go ask the neighbors if they've seen anything?" Thanks. Alex gave me a grateful smile. Somehow it seemed like all the smiles he'd been giving me lately had been grateful ones, as if I could only ever do him harm or favors, not make him happy just by being me. Then he turned away and set off, far too eagerly, I thought, towards the nearest house, while I steeled myself for a conversation with Frank. Chapter 5. For a moment, I was tempted to take the chicken way out and text Frank rather than calling him. But it was a lot easier to lie over text than over the phone. If Erin was there with him, or he knew where she was, I'd be much more likely to find out if I called. I brought up Frank McAvoy on my contacts list and hit call. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. Maybe he wasn't going to answer the phone. Rowena, what's up? I suppressed a pang of disappointment and dislike. Hi, Frank. Oh, geez. Why was I blanking on what to say now? It's not complicated. Spit it out. I didn't have a lot of amazing talents, but I was a good talker under pressure. I'd put that to the test on numerous occasions, and always been impressed with my own quick thinking and fluency. But now I was tongue-tied. Well, don't just stand there doing heavy breathing in my ear, said Frank. Give it to me. He chuckled. Irritation loosened whatever had blocked me before. Have you seen Erin today? I asked. No, why? You two plan a girls' night out. He chuckled again. Getting yourselves all pretty for the barbecue tomorrow. No. Frank had invited us to some kind of barbecue thing with friends from work on Saturday. It sounded dreadful to me, so I had blocked it from my memory, despite knowing it was a chance to make a good impression on people who could potentially be my own future colleagues. I was ambitious and career-minded, or just desperate, enough to go to something like that. I was not enough of a career woman to actually enjoy it. I haven't seen her all day, I told Frank, and she didn't come into work, and she's not at her place, and neither is her car, and she's not answering the phone. You don't have any idea where she might be. There was a pause at the other end of the line. When Frank spoke again, his voice had lost all of its forced jocularity and the sexual innuendo that always seemed just a little bit false to me. Where are you, Rowena? I'm standing in front of her front door. Alex and I drove up this evening when she didn't show up to work this morning and didn't answer her phone all day. Her car's not in the drive and she didn't answer the door. There aren't any lights on, and we can't hear anything inside the house, including when we call her phone. Alex is asking the neighbors if they've seen anything, and I thought I'd call you and see if you'd heard anything from her. There was another pause at the other end of the line. Alex tell you, never mind. He said Aaron might be in a little trouble, I said, about, stuff that happened earlier. That there's a journalist looking into, some stuff that Aaron did that might not, look so good. Fucking journalists, said Frank. Why can't they keep their fucking noses out of other folks' business? The words came out like he was thinking of something else, and was letting his mouth run to cover up his real thoughts. Yeah, I said. So, you don't have any idea where she might be? Not with me. Frank's voice was all business now. I haven't heard from her all day. I've got some places I can check, though. And you said Miller's there with you. Uh-huh. Alex was walking back from the neighbor's house, the set of his shoulders showing it had been a fruitless expedition. Erin used to go fucking off on drinking and sex binges whenever things got too hard for her, said Frank. She never pulled any of that shit with me, but I know she did it to Miller all the goddamn time, starting when they were in ROTC together. And to hear her tell it, he'd always go running after her on rescue missions, and he's still fucking doing it. So he probably has a good idea of where she might go. Tell him to make a list of all her favorite places and start going through them one by one. Let me know what you find. Okay, I said. I wasn't thrilled about being ordered around by Frank. But I had to admit his plan was the best one we had at the moment. What about you? I asked. I told you, I've got places I can look too. Let's check back in at, say, 2100 hours. Then we can go from there, decide whether we need to pull an all-nighter or not. He hung up before I could object. Chapter 6. Was that Frank? Does he know anything? He says he doesn't. He suggested you might know of, some places that Erin might go if she's, feeling bad, and that we should check them out. And he said he knew of some places to check too. We're supposed to call back at 9 to see if we've made any progress. Alex checked his phone. It's already almost 7. I bet you're starving. Well, yes. Can you make it till we get back to Monterey? Frank's idea isn't half bad, much as I fucking hate to admit it. And we could pick up some food while we trawl through bars, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Sounds great. I'll just... Alex fished in his pockets and came up empty. Do you have any paper? I want to leave her a note in case she comes back before we find her. I dug around in my purse for a while before coming up with an old envelope I'd been using for making grocery lists. The back was completely covered with reminders to buy bagels and coffee. The front was as yet unused. I tore it off, ripped out a clean square of paper from under the return address, and handed it to Alex, along with the cheap ballpoint pen I carried with me. The cheap ballpoint pen that was in imminent need of replacement, apparently, because Alex had to shake it a bunch of times before it would release its ink and allow him to write, "Aaron, give me a call when you see this, Alex," on it. He stuck it in the door jamb, where it rested precariously on the lock. Then we got in his car and set off back for Monterey. Chapter 7. What do you think? Alex asked when we were back on the highway heading south. Is she really with Frank and he's lying? If he is, he's doing a good job of it, I said. What do you think? Is he that good of a liar? Alex did a one-shoulder shrug while navigating around a car creeping along at 35 miles per hour in the right lane, belching ominous dark smoke. Frank's a complicated dude. I mean, you wouldn't think it to look at him. Most of the time he acts like a dumbass whose only goal is to sexually harass as many women as possible. And I have to fucking say, I think that impression is not wrong. But underneath it all, there's something cunning working away beneath that graying buzz cut. He got ahead pretty damn well when he was in the military, and it sounds like he's getting ahead pretty damn well now in the FBI. I think he's a dick who enjoys shoving his dickishness in everyone's face, but there's something real there, too, you know what I mean? Like, he's not just an ugly face. Yeah, I said. That is my impression, too. But I don't know if he's a good liar or not. I've never actually seen him lie that I know of. He's more the type to brazen his way through any situation by shouting the truth as loud as he could. He never hid what he was doing back, you know. Yeah, I said again. I got that sense from him as well. And I really don't think he was lying. I think he was worried about Erin. Or worried about something, at any rate. Well, maybe he's right, and we'll find her drunk off her ass in Alvarado Street or in front of the Presidio, said Alex. Do you think she'd do that? Get drunk where colleagues and students could see her? Alex made another one-shoulder shrug. I wouldn't think so. Like I said, work is the one thing that's always held her together, and she cares a lot about what subordinates, you know, like students, think of her. Since she's a girl, and she's short, and she's cute, she's always had to fight to be taken seriously. She'd get shit-faced and bang anything with a dick when she was hurting, but she'd do it where the people she wanted to impress couldn't see her do it. But I don't have any better guesses, so we'll start there and see what we find. Maybe someone will know something, I said encouragingly. Maybe she just needed some space to get her head on straight, and she'll come back tonight, see your note, and give you a call before we get home. Maybe, said Alex. Chapter 8. We started at Duffy's Tavern, a family-style restaurant and bar just outside the entrance to the Presidio, the garrison that housed the DLI and various other military offices. Erin was a regular, and the four of us had had dinner there the previous Friday to celebrate the end of my program. Because she was well known and because it was so close to work, Alex thought it unlikely that we'd find Erin there tonight, but maybe the staff would know something. In any case, we could get food while we fished for information. As expected, there was no sign of Erin when we stepped inside. It was transitioning from families out for supper to singles, couples, and groups out for a low-key Friday night of drinking and socializing. Many of them sported neat buzz cuts, the men, or neat above-the-collar hairstyles, the women, and the casual, jovial air of command I associated with American military officers. Alex ran into 3 people he knew from work. None of them had seen or heard from Erin all day. Our server, a college-age girl with dark brown hair, square features that hinted at Puebloan heritage, and a name tag with Tori written on it in block capital letters, hadn't seen her all day either, although she remembered her well. Yeah, of course, she said. She came in with you 2 last Friday, and she came in again with someone else this week. I think it was Wednesday? Was it the same man she was with on Friday? Alex asked. Tori shook her head. It was a woman? I'd never seen her here before. Do you remember what she looked like? Alex asked. Tori wrinkled up her forehead. She was older, she said. Not like old, but older. Older than you two, or Erin. Kind of like my mom's age, like maybe 50. She had this awful haircut, like a mullet or something, and it was all big and poofy, but not in a good way. And she obviously hadn't had it colored in a while because I could see gray streaks all the way through it. I remember because Erin's hair is always so nice. That was true. Erin might be a hot mess on the inside, but she wore her sleek, almost black hair in a neat collar-length bob that managed to look both feminine and professional, and also vaguely military, even though she was a civilian now. Anyway, I thought this woman might be like an aunt or something, even though they didn't look much alike, but she had that look, you know what I mean? Like someone's aunt. But she wasn't very nice to Aaron. Tori scrunched up her nose. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it must have been real mean, because Erin kept shaking her head like she was getting more and more upset. And then she told the woman to go away. I heard her even though I was 2 tables over, and everyone on this side of the room turned to look at her. And then the woman got up and gave her a business card or something, and then she left. And I thought Erin was like going to cry or something. I thought Alex would ask a follow-up question, but he just sat there looking like all the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I tried to think of some smart questions I could ask myself. What did she do afterwards, was what I came up with. Tori frowned. Erin or the other woman? Both, I said. She shrugged. The other woman went over to the bar and said she wanted to settle the bill. I had to go over and help with that. When I came back to the table, Erin was gone. I glanced over at Alex. He was still sitting there like all the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Do you remember anything more about the other woman? I asked. Did you, happen to see her credit card or anything? Tori giggled nervously. Wouldn't that be like a violation of privacy or something? I think you're okay as long as you don't give us her actual card number, I said. The thing is, I looked around and then leaned in towards Tori conspiratorially. We're looking for Erin. We're worried about her. So anything you can tell us that might help us find her would be really useful. Tori's eyes, lined with copious eyeliner and framed with heavily mascaraed lashes, got big. You think she's kidnapped or something? No, I said. Although now that she'd put the idea in my head, I was starting to worry. We think she might be unhappy. We just want to check on her and make sure she's okay. Tori's eyes widened even more. You think she might, hurt herself or something? No, I said soothingly, although now that thought was going to haunt me too. We just want to, check on her and make sure she's okay. Maybe this woman on Wednesday was giving her a hard time, and now she needs a friend to help her out. And we'd like to know who this woman is too, in case... I trailed off, running out of ideas. But Tori was off and running anyway. Maybe she's extorting money from her or something, she said enthusiastically. I said. I'll go get Zeke, she said. Zeke turned out to be the bartender, who also handled the register. He had a full reddish-brown beard that balanced out his balding head, a build that suggested bouncer more than bartender, and a shy smile whenever he had to interact with women. Sure, I remember Erin coming in on Wednesday, he said, not quite looking at me. And yeah, it's like Tori said. She was with this woman we'd never seen in here before. And they had words, and the woman got up and paid at the bar and left. And Erin slipped out then too. Do you remember the woman's name? I asked. He crinkled up his forehead in an I'm thinking hard expression. I think it started with an H, he shrugged. I can't remember anything more than that, I'm afraid. Could you, look at the credit card receipts? I asked. He shook his head. That'd be like a major violation of privacy. And the manager'd have my head if he found out. Wish I could help out more. Oh, I said. Well, thanks. And if you think of anything, let me know. I'll leave you my cell number. I wrote it down on a napkin with confident efficiency, as if I gave my cell number out to strange men all the time. Zeke gave me and Alex a back-and-forth look, like he was trying to figure out the situation. Then he pocketed the napkin, told me he'd call if he thought of anything, and left. Chapter 9. Alex and I finished up our food. I'd gone for fries again, despite all my good intentions to lose the weight that had been creeping on all year, and stepped out onto the street. It was now after 8 p.m., and the twilight was deepening as Friday evening transitioned into Friday night, with all the promise of wildness that held. What do you think? I asked Alex. Keep checking bars, or follow up on this H woman. She's gone to be the journalist, don't you think? Do you know anything more about her? What if, he said, looking up and down the street instead of at me, I dropped you off back home so you could follow up on H while I started working Alvarado Street. I don't want you to mess up your knee on this mission. I'd torn my left ACL during the spring. It was not healing well. I'd buckled down and had it looked at last month, shuddering with horror as I paid for an out-of-network provider. They'd prescribed physical therapy. I'd gone to a couple of sessions and then stopped when I ran out of money. Plus, I'd felt even worse after the sessions than before them. I'd been assured that was normal and desirable. I had my doubts. I said, okay, I guess. I'm not really sure what I'd be doing at home, though. Call Frank, he said. Tell him what you found. Maybe he'll know something. I know he's been looking into the journalist on his downtime already. If she does enough digging, we're all going to land in deep shit. He's already engaging in major CYA. You should go back to HQ, see what you can find out, and wait for me or Frank, or Zeke, to call. I said, I guess that makes sense. It was a little under 15 minutes to get back to the apartment. I tried to probe Alex on the drive about the journalist, and, as delicately as I could, about what she might uncover that was so bad. Other than the obvious, that is. But he gave me monosyllabic answers and shrugs in response. I knew he was upset and under pressure and probably racked with guilt. I knew he was doing the best he could to be nice to me under the circumstances. But I still found his behavior annoying. And I didn't really know what to do next. Alex, Aaron, and Frank were all the people with the real training and experience in intelligence gathering. Not to mention the networks that would allow them to gather said intelligence. I felt helpless and out of my depth. I'd done my best on my own, and netted the interesting but so far useless information that Aaron had had dinner on Wednesday with a woman whose name may or may not have begun with H, and that H had upset her. I guessed it was nice to know, but it wasn't exactly actionable, and I didn't see what else I could find out on my own, especially not stuck in the apartment. And the need to have someone there was non-existent. We all had cell phones. I could answer the phone while bar crawling with Alex just as well as I could sitting at his kitchen table. Given his sour mood, I thought Alex was going to drop me off at the curb, but he parked the car and walked me inside. Lock the door after me, he told me. I gave him a sideways look. Are you, expecting danger? I asked. He shook his head, too quickly. This isn't a great neighborhood, he said. You know that. Yeah, I do, I said. And you know I always practice all reasonable safety protocols because of it. So what are you worried about? Is that why you want me to stay here instead of coming with you? He chewed on the left corner of his lower lip for a moment. I didn't think I'd ever seen him make such an anxious gesture before. It's messy, he finally said. I mean, I don't know what the fuck Erin has gotten herself mixed up in, but it's really fucking messy. That I'm pretty damn sure of. And when she's drunk, it's not pretty. I don't want you to have to see that. And I'm afraid she might do some stuff that's not great. To you. I don't want you to have to deal with that. I don't want you to get dragged into all the bad shit that surrounds her. That surrounds me. You think she'd say hateful stuff to me? Yeah, and worse, maybe. You think she might attack me? He shrugged unhappily. I don't want to think that, but she's really not herself when she's drunk. I'd rather you stayed far the fuck away from all that, Rowena. Do you think she's dangerous? I asked. To me, or to you, or to herself? He chewed on his lip some more. I really don't want to think that, but I've got to, you know what I mean? I can't ignore the possibility that she might do something really stupid. She got a concealed carry permit this spring, and she's been carrying a handgun in her purse. Wait, I said. You mean she just got a concealed carry permit this spring? Like, right before she was shot by Frank? Alex nodded, miserably. That's why they were on the range. She wanted to brush up on her firearm skills. Why did she get a concealed carry permit and a handgun? I asked. He made an I don't know gesture. She didn't say. I didn't know anything about it until, afterwards. But as far as you know, she still has the gun, I said. She's potentially walking around right now, full of pain and maybe drunk off her ass, with a deadly weapon in her purse. He nodded even more miserably. Okay, I said. Do you think we should call the police? He shook his head, a convulsive motion of denial. That could bring even more shit down on her than she's already dealing with. If I could just find her before she does something stupid. Okay, I said. You go look for her. I'll call Frank, and I'll think about how else we might try to track her down.